My neighbor tries claiming my house. This happened a little bit ago, about a month, and it was a bizarre experience to say the least. I'm 15, and I was playing some video games before passing out. It was about, say, 11 p.m., when I hear the doorbell ring. Out of instinct, I begin walking downstairs, but about halfway there rationality came to mind. Who the FK rings a doorbell at 11 p.m.? I silently strode back upstairs and stood in the hall, kinda expecting something bad to happen. An exact minute later, it rings twice. My parents begin to leave their room, and give me a quizzical look, and all I had to respond was a shrug. Then he starts banging on the door. My mother jumps at the first bang, and my father's eyes widened, but more in confusion than fear. He decided to go downstairs and peep through the view hole. It was our neighbor. My dad hesitantly opened the door, and I could hear my father's voice tremble slightly. "Hey, what do you need?" Next thing I hear is an entire full-blown scream argument from our neighbor, claiming that this household was his, and we stole it from him. My father's uneasiness was quickly replaced with annoyance, and he simply shut the door without giving our neighbor the time of day. My dad stepped on the first step going up the stairwell when our neighbor first hit the door. I'm not talking banging with a fist, this man was full body slamming it. My father was stunned for a second, and my neighbor charged the door again. This time, we began to hear the splintering of wood. Everyone reacted at once. My father went to brace the door with his body, my mother went to go get the other two kids, and I went for 911. The body slamming ensued for another 5 minutes, and while I was on the phone with 911, it stopped. I thought it was over, and I was relieved. But I still stuck on the phone. I go peek out the front window of my house, and boy, was it only getting started. Our neighbor took his Jeep Wrangler and simply directed it straight at our house. We had zero clue what he was doing, until he hit the gas and we heard the squealing of tires, then he immediately hit the brakes. He was trying to scare us out of the house. I was still on the phone with 911, and I stepped away from the window to comfort my siblings, crack jokes and such. Eventually, police arrived and arrested him. The next morning, I left for school, still shaken from the night before. I stepped onto our front steps, and saw tire marks leading up to our front door. The lunatic actually nearly rammed our door down with his car. I really never want to see this cunt ever again, but he lives directly to my right. FK my life. Edit, alright, I don't know if he has a mental illness or not, I'm sorry. And no, I'm not going to physically harm him via blade nor bullet. Stop suggesting that. Edit 2, no, I do not care if he had threatened us, the situation was resolved with no one harmed. Stop saying my father should have hurt anyone. There was no need, rationality over emotion. And no, not even I trust my guardians with a firearm. I would probably be the best candidate for it, but I doubt my father will buy a gun and rely on his 15-year-old son to use it. Best that I wait until I'm of age. Holy crap. Smart thinking not to answer the door yourself. Sounds like you and your family work well as a team. We all know that family comes first. My father is more willing to protect head-on, my mother protects her children, while I was always self-taught that 911 is my best friend. And I'm 15, it was 11 p.m., and I'm still partially scared of the dark. What compelled me to even get halfway to answer the door is beyond me. Did you ever find out why he was behaving that way? Drunk or something? Either way, OMG terrifying. No. My guess is drugs. While in his car, he was fidgeting with everything imaginable. While drunk, from what I've seen, everything is slurred rather than sharp and fidgety. Never found out though. The police dealt with the scenario, and I went back inside and kind of just stared at the wall, wondering what could have happened. Hello, my guess would be mental illness. Funnily enough, something similar happened to my sister recently. She lives in a flat in the suburbs. It happened a couple times that they came home to their yard in a disarray, gate open, plants knocked over, etc. One night my sister woke up to extremely loud music being played. She assumed it was the neighbors and went back to sleep. This even happened several times spaced out, I believe. Then one night her and her flatmates woke up to loud banging on the door. It was some dude they had never seen before, and he went off, saying they had stolen the house from him. Parked behind him was a car with the door open and loud music blasting, the same stuff that had woken them up on previous nights. He went so far as to draw his finger over his throat and tell my sister she was evil and a witch. Then he would leave, drive round the block and come back again. All the while acting very aggressive and saying weird and unsettling things. Obviously they called the cops and told them the situation and the license plate of the car. A day or so later, the cops called back and told them they needed to talk to their landlord. Turns out this crazy dude was the landlord's brother and that he has schizophrenia. The landlord was out of the country on a trip, and apparently sometimes when that happens his brother just decides not to take his meds. They apologized and said he's not dangerous in any way. But my sister was pretty spooked. Especially since he had clearly staked the house out for some time. I never heard the words schizophrenic and safe used together. And definitely about someone not on their meds. Hope you sister had a long talk with her landlord after going through with that. I would have threatened an ass whooping if something like this happened to me. Mental illness or not, I have a low tolerance for destructive behavior. Especially if it involves my things. You definitely should invest in some pocket sand. Always comes in handy. Ugh, I've had two similar experiences. First, when I was a child and a strange man with a mental illness walked right into our house. He thought it was his, and attacked my dad when my dad went to check as he heard the door. My mum shoved us kids into a bedroom and told us to sit still, and went back out and called the police. The second happened when we bought a new house and had just moved in. Apparently the neighbors on all sides were related, and had tried to get the house for another group of extended family, but we got it instead. One of the neighbors jumped up from behind a stone wall that surrounded our property with a water hose, spraying my dad who was doing yard work while screaming, "I'm not afraid of you," over and over. Jesus, he was batshit crazy. Don't mean to steal my friend's thunder cause this is his story, but my friend lives in a quiet neighborhood and they had an old busted car sitting on their property for maybe a year or so. One day as my friend is exiting his vehicle, the neighbor backs him against the garage and puts a huge knife to his throat. The neighbor said something along the lines of, "If you don't get rid of that F-king car, I'm going to kill you." He took it to court, but unfortunately they claimed there wasn't enough proof that it happened. So imagine that kind of tension with your neighbor. Luckily the neighbor moved not too long after. That's quite an effective HOA tactic. Your parents need to reach out to PD and find out what's happening. As a 15-year-old, this isn't something you can do. At that point, if your neighbor's actions were ever explained, they can be made aware of what happened. It may be necessary to secure a trespass warrant and order of protection. Good job thinking on your feet and not opening the door. Your first action is always secure, then notify the police, then account for everyone who should be there. You probably kept a bad situation from becoming a tragic one. Add 911 to your speed dial and keep your phone on you at all times. If he so much as fidgets a finger toward you, your family, or your home, call the police. This may not be over. Especially if he is mentally ill and or on drugs. Oh, of course. My neighbor got off free, from what I can tell. So if he dares knock on my door again, the police recognize my voice. My neighbor is the same. He think he owns parts of our lawn even though we had a survey done that determined where the property line is. He argued that a rock that's been there since he was 5 determined the property line. That rock is movable, so I can basically push that rock towards his property and claim that it's mine. I think he has some mental illness. Have your parents tried asking the other neighbors if he's done anything like this to them? I'm glad you're okay, That's terrifying. He's never done something like this before. Neighbor's first time seeing him like this as well. Holy hell. This reminds me of my similar experience that happened to my family. A few years back, when I was about 15 too, I was visiting my family in my home country. One night, around 1 a.m., when we were all outside smoking hookah, the neighbor came over and started throwing rocks at us and telling us to leave his property. My cousin's family owned the home and the driveway was gated, so we were like, this is not your house, get the FK away. He got mad and came back the next night, throwing rocks at the windows. This then led to the night next where he brought knives and tried to attack my cousins. Basically every night he terrorized the home claiming it was his property. It eventually led to him successfully attacking my uncle. He made it out alive though, thank God, and my family ended up just selling the property because the terrorizing wouldn't stop. Also, the police are completely useless and corrupt in my home country, so they wouldn't do anything. Turns out, the guy scaring us was part of an opioid drug cartel and was also heavily on drugs. He owned the property next door which he used as a drug den. Your neighbor is definitely suffering from mental illness or is on drugs. I'm happy the police were able to get him. Don't hurt him, just poop on his porch every morning. Man, I could barely take a shit once a day. That's some dedication. There was a time when a homeless man snuck inside my parents' house in the middle of the night. Woke up my mom and told her that he's her boyfriend. My father gave him a good punch and dragged him into the nearby police station. This happened to me and my mom when I was about 7. My mom went and got her boyfriend's Mossberg and all she did was chamber a shell and the screaming and pounding immediately stopped. Cops told her they never found the guy, but he definitely didn't want to FK with our house again. So shooting him was an option, but sometimes the threat of guns is more useful than the gun in situations like this. Holy shit. I'd be FKing terrified. I hope they keep him in jail a long time.